You all know that I love hi-fi gear that's full of modern features, which is no doubt why this channel features more solid-state amps, but that doesn't mean I'm not listening to your requests for more tube-based electronics. Canor Audio just dropped a pretty sweet hybrid all-in-one integrated amplifier in their new Virtus A3, so everyone's gonna win today. You may recall that I reviewed this lesser-known Slovenian brand a few years ago. Their now discontinued AI-110 all-analog tube integrated has served as one of my reference amplifiers for the past 4 years. The new Virtus A3 features both analog and digital capabilities in a single chassis. It's also more powerful than the older AI, generating 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms and 150 watts into 4, thanks to its hybrid true dual mono Class A/AB amplifier design. The amplifier's tube input stage is designed in such a way that the signal stays clean regardless of whether it comes from an analog or digital source, with ultra-low distortion characteristics not typically associated with tube-based gear. If you listen closely, you heard right. The Canor comes with a high-quality built-in dual mono ESS digital to analog converter, or DAC, and it features multiple ways to connect, including 2 coaxial inputs, 2 optical inputs, a professional AES EBU connection, and a USB port. I was really hoping to see HDMI here, especially considering the competition the Virtus faces, but I guess I'll have to wait and hope that HDMI is included in the next edition. Perhaps the bigger head scratcher is the amp's lack of wireless connections like Bluetooth and AirPlay, or even Ethernet, which means there is no built-in streaming or way to stream music from your phone or computer. Now, on a more positive note though, the Canor features a built-in moving magnet or moving coil phono preamp, a high-quality headphone amp, and both unbalanced and balanced analog inputs. There are even balanced and unbalanced preamp outs that can be used with external amplifiers or subwoofers, though I have to say, the Virtus does not have bass management built in, so you have to set your subwoofers, crossover point, phase, and level on your subwoofer. On what is otherwise a very old school amplifier is a new smartphone-like OLED display on the chunky rotary volume dial. A quick swipe of the dial reveals various menus and settings such as input sensitivity and home theater pass-through, as well as options to display, virtual meters or the Canor logo on the volume knob during playback. The screen and the dot matrix display can both be disabled for a more streamlined look. Now, despite Canor's forward-thinking design and use of an OLED display, basic controls such as balance and tone are not available. Even more curious is discovering that most of the menus that are accessible by swiping across the end of the volume knob cannot be accessed using the included remote. I tested the Virtus using my reference DAC streamer, the Eversolo A8, which allowed me to add an Apple TV 4K and TCL's QM8K TV to the signal chain. This also let me compare the Canor's DAC to the Eversolo's. The A8 also let me test out the Canor's balanced and unbalanced analog inputs. I spun a couple of records on my Alva TT V2 and tested the Canor's built-in phono preamp. I used 3 different pairs of speakers with the Canor, our Klipsch Cornwall 4s, the new La Scala AL6s, and the Arundel 1528 Tower 8. The Canor had no trouble driving any of the speakers, including the more challenging full-range Arundels, which are rated at 4 ohms. Right off the bat, I want to temper expectations. Despite being a hybrid amplifier with a tube-based input stage, the Virtus is not your typical, quote, tube amp. It does not possess an overly warm or lush sound that one might associate with tube amps of, say, the 60s and 70s. In reality, the Virtus is impressively neutral. That isn't to say that this amp is indistinguishable from an all-solid-state Class AB or even a Class D amp. There is a subtle sensation of bloom or weight in the bass and some noticeable air or breathiness in the treble extension that I could see being associated with that, quote, tube-like sound. But apart from that, the Virtus has a decidedly modern-day tone. The bass sounds deeper, a bit fuller and weightier, especially at the extremes with this amplifier, giving a sense of extra heft when playing music through either the Scala or the Arundel speakers. Notably, this amplifier does not manage the low notes with as much finesse or precision as some amps like the DVLA Astra, which handles low notes with greater control and clarity no matter how loud the music gets. Is the Canor or DVLA better? Well, that's really going to depend on your personal preferences. Switching focus to the mid-range and treble, the Canor is really quite nice. Vocals have a very natural quality to them, staying true to the artist or instrument's original sound. This amp does not add any coloration, letting the recording and the connected speaker sound shine through. When it came to testing this amp on the La Scalas and Arundels, trust me, you couldn't ask for two more different approaches to speaker design. Yet, I don't feel like the Canor sounded better or worse based on the speaker it was driving. And yes, I made sure to adjust the volume to account for the speaker's different sensitivities. While the size of the musical imaging, focus, and presence change, this had more to do with the different speaker designs than the amp fluctuating in response to different speaker types or loads, which is exactly what you want from a quality amplifier, one that over time will sustain any possible changes to your equipment or speakers. I was really impressed by how smoothly and clearly the Virtus reproduces sound, especially in the high frequencies. When I listen to the piano trills and pieces from John Batiste or the unique electronic pops and pings from Seven Lions, I noticed that the Canor added a sense of air and lightness and a lingering quality to each note. This made the music feel more expansive, allowing the last moments of each note to be heard just that little bit longer, which is a quality often associated with tube amplifiers. In reality, the amp's ability to hang on to every note, a touch longer and separate each instrument with more focus and definition is likely due to its dual mono construction and isolation with respect to its various internal parts. In many ways, the Canor's presentation of space, more specifically, separation throughout the soundstage, reminded me a lot of the Nu Vista 600.2 from Musical Fidelity, which is another hybrid amp that features dual mono construction. The Nu Vista is the better amp in this comparison. It has greater levels of control, especially in the bass, not to mention more appreciable dynamic snap. However, there are similarities between the two, which I'll get into later in the comparison. All that said, the Canor will not rob any connected speaker of its ability to throw a boundary-defying soundstage, provided, the design of that speaker is capable of such reproduction, and the same is true of the focus and delineation within said stage. Here, the amp is rock solid. At loud volumes, it is lightning quick, possessing the ability to violently start and stop. However, at moderate to lower volumes, which are typically anything below, say, 70 dB, there are other amps that sound a little more grippy or contrasty compared to the Canor. When comparing the Canor's internal DAC to that of our Eversolo, I came away feeling that the Eversolo extracted just a little bit more nuance from whatever I was listening to, whether it was streaming directly from the A8 or Apple Music on our Apple TV. However, there were instances where I preferred the slightly less analytical side of the Virtus's internal DAC, especially when listening to 80s and 90s era rock music. If you've been following any of the new Alien Earth series and reliving your youth through the end credits music like Christy has, the Canor will be just what the doctor ordered. As for the phono stage, it's really good, possessing great neutrality and separation. It doesn't clean up the sound of your favorite records the way a Technics R1000 or the DVLA Astra can, but the Canor doesn't render them in an artificially lush or vague way either. If you want to get into vinyl, the built-in preamp within this amp is of a high enough quality that I don't think you're gonna need to eye a separate phono preamp as you zero in on which turntable and cartridge combo is ultimately right for you. When it comes to comparisons, the Virtus exists in a sweet spot. Yes, the Canor is a bit more boutique or esoteric compared to, say, a McINTOSH or even a Musical Fidelity, of which Canor is the known OEM, but it isn't so rare that should you need support or service, you could end up SOL. I've already made a few comparisons to the Musical Fidelity Nu Vista 600.2, which at a hair under 10 grand is more expensive than the Canor. Not to mention, the Nu Vista requires you to also invest in a separate DAC and phono preamp, and these are two things that add to the overall cost of ownership. In absolute terms, I believe the Musical Fidelity does sound that nth degree better, possessing, again, more control, more dynamic snap, and absolute finesse throughout the entire frequency range. However, Given its higher price and focus on being, just an amp rather than a comprehensive audio product, this is somewhat expected. Where the Canor absolutely wins is in the value category. While the Nu Vista may be the better overall sounding amp, once you factor in the cost of adding a DAC and a phono preamp, I'm doubtful the majority of listeners will feel the difference in sound quality are ultimately worth it, if they're even noticeable, especially when listening in imperfect rooms. Not to take anything away from the Nu Vista, I love it, but the Canor is a cheaper and more versatile solution that offers a lot of what makes the musical fidelity great. At more than double the price of the Canor, the Marantz Model 10 is the more powerful and arguably the more perfect sounding amplifier, at least if we're going solely off measurements. And if that's your thing, by all means, snatch up a Model 10. But for my money, if I had to choose between these two products, I would choose the Canor. It has just enough character here and there to make the act of listening to it feel less like a lecture and more like an experience. Plus, I don't need to spend more money on extras like a DAC to enjoy basic digital connectivity. Now, one integrated amplifier that I would spend more money on is the 7200 from McINTOSH, especially if equipped with its newer DA2 DAC module. I mean, even with the older DA1 module, the 7200 and Virtus features are very evenly matched, although the Mac includes a built-in tuner. Now, upgrading to the DA2 DAC module with HDMI takes the 7200 to another level, especially if you're a person like me whose system needs to pull double duty. I understand that the 7200 is not a hybrid tube solid-state design like the Canor, but you'd never know it thanks to that, very distinctive McINTOSH sound. However, if you're looking for a more budget-friendly option with similar features, power output, and an organic full-bodied sound, I would check out the EXA 100 from Cambridge Audio. While the EXA is not exactly the same as the Canor, they do share some similarities in terms of what they can do and the enjoyable listening experience they provide. Where the Cambridge may ultimately win out is in the inclusion of modern conveniences like HDMI and Bluetooth. You can also connect two different pairs of speakers and switch between them, A/B style, which is really convenient. Yes, the Canor amp is that nth degree better, but that nth degree costs you 3 times as much. As a longtime Canor fan, I've really enjoyed the Virtus. While I still love the AI 110, the Virtus is easier to use, and I prefer its all-in-one approach to music playback. Don't get me wrong, the 110 is like my deckwear on PEDs, but it's also a fire-breathing beast that's not all that practical for someone living in the desert, especially during the summer months. So I'm pretty happy to see this new amp. It is a near-perfect blend of what Canor is truly great at and known for, and that's amplifier design and sound quality. So that's it. That is now my take on Canor's brand new do-it-all integrated amp, the Virtus A3. What'd you guys think? Had any of you heard of it? Are you learning about something for the first time? Let's get it going down in the comments. Let's start the conversation. In the meantime, remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I guess we'll see you on the next video. Bye.